Hello, I'm Sebastian Michael, and this is this Saturday's sonnet. That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. And this is Sonnet 73, which I personally believe to be one of the most beautiful sonnets in the entire collection. One of the most profound ones, again a deeply heartfelt one, and one which reveals to us a truth, an insight, a possible truth, an understanding, I think, at any rate, a possibility, certainly, of what the sonnets are about, where Shakespeare is at, where his young lover is at. That comes as a bit of a surprise. And I will tell you, obviously, where I think this surprise lies. Because on the surface of it, what it seems to give us is mostly a meditation on age and on the nature of what age does to a person, in this case to me as the poet, the writer, as William Shakespeare, and how it positions me therefore in relation to where you, the young lover, are. And of course it's not surprising, the young lover is in the springtime of his life. He is at the beginning, he is young and he is blossoming. And here I am talking about myself as at the end of my season, that time of year, thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs, which shake against the cold. Why don't we go straight into it and find out what this means? It's not a difficult sonnet to understand this. And maybe that's another reason why it is so beautiful, because it's another one of those that are actually really quite clear and really quite easy to relate to. Certainly very easy to relate to when you reach a certain age and you realize, this color of your beard, that doesn't come from youth and being in the first flush of spring. We'll get to what age Shakespeare actually is. But let's first of all look at the translation, as it were. What does it mean? Sonnet 73. That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold. That's a wonderful image. Of course it's a wonderful image. It's poetry by William Shakespeare. Those boughs which shake against the cold because of the wind. The wind would make them shake. The wind in the landscape, those boughs. This is a tree, obviously we're talking about the boughs, on which there are now only a few leaves, a few yellow ones, or none, or few. And isn't it beautiful how he goes through the declination, not in the normal order, not yellow leaves or few or none, but when yellow leaves, or maybe no leaves at all, perhaps a few. it's almost like an afterthought, the view. And you can see the tree on the hill, can't you? On an English landscape in the winter, in the grey, cold, maybe slightly already frosted, slightly snowy winter. Pretty cold winters at that time in Elizabethan England. It was a little mini ice age. Bare ruin. So it doesn't need any more explanation, does it? You may in me behold, in me you see, in me you observe the time of year, the season, when yellow leaves or none of you do hang upon those boughs which shake against. Well, that's autumn. Autumn going on to winter. Winter, maybe autumn, maybe there are still a few leaves on there, maybe it's not quite over yet. But soon it will be. It's the end of my time. Bare, ruined choirs, where late the sweet birds sang. This is gorgeous imagery, gorgeous imagery. Bare, ruined choirs are the empty choirs in churches. There are different ways of interpreting this, but quite generally accepted, I think, when you read editors, when you read these sonnets and you read what editors write about them, people agree quite broadly now that this is the imagery of empty, ruined, of disused, emptied choirs in churches. The choir in the church is the part where the choir sits, where people sing. And the sweet birds, of course in a tree, the sweet birds sit in the springtime and in the summer even. The sweet birds sit on the boughs, they sit on the branches and they sing. And in church, the sweet birds are the young boys, the boys who have these gorgeous voices you can still hear in boys' choirs. And now they're bare, now they're empty, they're derelict. They have been left behind. There are good potential, good possible historical reasons why churches in England at that time are empty, why the choirs are ruined. But that's almost by the by. The image is sufficient. We know what that looks like. We can imagine a church that is bare and ruined, that is disused, where once upon a time there were these boys singing, a tree where in the summer, in the spring, the birds sing. Now it's empty. Now there is no singing, there is no song. And the second thought, in me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west. It's the same observation differently expressed in a different image. I am in the autumn towards winter of my life. I am in the evening towards night of my day, after sunset, that kind of light you see in me, the twilight of such day as after sunset. The sun is already down. It's still light outside, but not for much longer. It's a soft light. It's still beautiful. This is the wonderful thing, isn't it? It's still actually beautiful, but it's a special kind of beauty. It's a particular beauty that you have to be able to appreciate and you have to be able to see it. But when you do see it, it's exquisite, really, and melancholy. That kind of light, as after sunset fadeth in the west, is what you see in me, which by and by black night doth take away. Black night comes in, creeps in on daylight, takes it away. The darkness of the night takes away the light. And remember, in Shakespeare's day, this is the case. This is not some purely imagined poetical fantasy. This is the daily reality. When the sun goes, you don't just flick a switch. The lights don't come on. There's no street lighting anywhere. There are maybe some lanterns in London, but there isn't even gaslight yet. There are candles, there are torches, and candles are expensive. And in the countryside, and this is clearly a countryside image, it gets dark. And it gets a little bit less dark when the stars are out and the moon is out. But in a winter night when it's cloudy and grey, after the sun has set, you get maybe a little bit of twilight, and then black night creeps in. Death's second self that seals up all in rest. This is not an invention of Shakespeare, of course, the comparison between death and sleep, sleep as a short death, as a temporary death. The night, when it comes, envelops life in darkness, and because of that, life stops. The black night is like the second self to death. It's a harbinger. It reminds us, it's a premonition, actually, almost, of death every day in the cycle of life. In me, third thought, the third image conjured up by the poet to say the same thing. In me, thou seest the glowing of such fire that on the ashes of his youth doth lie. I am the embers. I'm not the wild, burning, passionate flames of young fire. I am that fire that on the ashes of the youth doth lie. How glorious is this? Is not just an image, it's a whole concept of the fire of youth, burning youth itself up. And now you have these embers that still glow upon the ashes of that which youth has burnt. As the deathbed, the ashes are the deathbed whereon it must expire. It, this fire that I am, these embers that I am, I have to expire on the deathbed that I've created myself through burning up my youth, of course, because I was living, consumed with that which it was nourished by, that which used to nourish me, the energy, the flames, the wood, the energy from the wood, that which used to fuel me, quite literally, when I am a fire. I have eaten it up. I am now the rest of this. I am the embers, that type of fire that lies on top of the ashes. I am now expiring. And then this thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. The fact that you see this, the fact that you observe this, that I am towards the end of my year, my day, my fire, that makes you realize that you must leave me before long, and that realization makes your love even stronger. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's a magnificent piece of poetry. And if the sonnets tell us anything, and I say if, because after all, this is our premise, is it not? Our premise is that they do tell us something, that we have a genuine writer, me, the poet William Shakespeare, addressing a genuine person, a young man with genuine feelings, his genuine living through this relationship as it unfolds. That's the premise. The premise is that the sonnets tell us about that. And we have argued over many episodes now why this is so, and we have found instances aplenty to support this view. So much so that I am happy to state categorically that I consider the idea, I think I've said this before, that these sonnets are a fantasy, that they are an invention purely of the mind, of the poetic mind, and that they are purely an exercise in writing, that they don't relate to a real person. I consider that to be nonsense. I think we can dismiss that idea now. It diminishes the poetry, it diminishes Shakespeare unnecessarily, that it is unwarranted to believe that that's the case from what we've got. But I still say if, because after all we have no actual factual proof. Nowhere has Shakespeare signed he has almost signed 154 pieces of paper, but nowhere do we have a statement by the writer saying that, yes, I, William Shakespeare, wrote all these sonnets as genuine reflections of my emotional being. I think that matters not one jot. I think they tell us something, and if they do tell us something, then this sonnet gives us a whole new profound insight. Because we know from what just happened last week. I say last week in this series. I realise most of you will probably never actually watch these in real time, in the time that I'm publishing them. So you may watch this at any given moment. You may watch them out of sequence or listen to them out of sequence on Podbean. And this is all fine, but last week, as in last week when I recorded the last batch of sonnets and did the last episode, number 10, we knew there was a scandal. There was slander abroad. There were tongues wagging. People were bringing down the reputation of the young man. We know this. People are speaking ill of you. And in last week's episode, in episode 10, we also had this epic rant where I, the poet, lashed out against all the things that are bad in the world, the ill state of affairs. Again, this is unequivocal, that it doesn't need to be argued about, that it's obvious and obviously clear and obviously true. And now, in this subsequent batch, you realise I keep doing these in seven each week, we have very important new evidence emerging. And it comes in sonnets number 71 and 72, where I effectively tell the young man to forget about me because I bring him into disrepute. Remember, in the previous batch, in the last sonnets we looked at, the young man has brought either himself into disrepute or he was being brought into disrepute unfairly, without any actual genuine reason. Both these statements were possible as interpretation. And now, in 71 and 72, I, the poet, say, distance yourself from me because I give you a bad name. Quite literally, I say this. And there's this line, I am shamed for that which I bring forth, and so should you, to love things nothing worth. And so suddenly we realise that William Shakespeare now sees himself implicated in this. He may already have known this, but he certainly now expresses it. He expresses it in 71, 72. These two sonnets tell the young man very, very clearly, you are better off without me. Literally, your reputation is at stake. Distance yourself from me because I bring things forth that are worth nothing. How big a contrast to earlier sonnets where I have asserted that I make you live forever in my poetry. My whole confidence as a poet and my claim to a position as a poet has been undermined very, very strongly. Incidentally, if you hear strange new noises and see the light changing, if you're watching this on YouTube or here, listening to this and Podbean, we're approaching a little thunderstorm here, I think, in Brooklyn, New York, where I'm at the moment. You will hear the rain falling on the skylight here. It's just the way it is. I can't change that at the moment. And I don't think we're going to delay the recording of this because, hey, it's real life. That's what happens. The weather changes. Clearly, evidenced in sonnets number 71 and 72, which are the two sonnets that precede this one, since the last episode, before this sonnet that I've just read for you, I, Shakespeare, express myself tarnished. My own reputation is tarnished, and through his association with me, the young man is suffering damage. I bring forth things that are worth nothing. You will be considered worth nothing if you don't dissociate yourself from me. And then this. Now this sonnet has nothing to do with my writing, and it has nothing to do with my reputation, but it does have something very strongly to do with how I experience the young man's love for me. A caveat, it could be, it is possible, we have to bear this in mind, that this is wishful thinking on my part, that I'm not observing something that is actually the case, but that I'm expressing a hope or a wish that it be so. But you will know by now, if you've been watching these episodes, that I tend to hold with the notion that in the absence of certainty, likelihood is our friend. And we've now listened to 73 sonnets, and in these sonnets, I, the poet, don't really hold back all that much with how I position myself, how I position the young man. They seem to regularly, frequently come across as quite direct, quite unfiltered, almost impetuous. And so the likelihood here, I believe, the stronger, the greater likelihood, by some margin, is that this is not me expressing a faint hope or a wish or a delicate desire. We've gone past that stage a long time ago. I think it is far more likely that by now into the proceedings I express things the way they are, because I can. I've been doing that. I've been doing it very bluntly, very honest, in a very self-deprecating manner. There is no need for me at this point to express a wish or a hope without saying so. Because I do. I occasionally express things as a wish or a hope. For example, there was a sonnet not long ago where I said, well, I hope that there may be a chance, there may be the possibility, the miracle indeed, that my lines will keep my love fresh forever. But here, I don't express any wish or hope or uncertainty. I say, this thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. It's a statement of realization of fact. And that surely tells us that in the exchange, and remember how we in one episode observed that this has to be an exchange. This can't be a broadcast or a podcast of Shakespearean nature, of just the poet sending poem after poem after poem out into the world with nothing ever coming back. It's too dynamic. There are too many things that happen and to change all the time for this to be a one-sided, one-way traffic of communication. And again, accepting that as the most likely way that it is, this sonnet actually reveals to us that the young man must have done or said something to reassure me, to confirm, to affirm his love for me. In spite of everything, he is standing by me. And that's a revelation. It's not a revelation that changes everything, because we've had indications towards this before. But it means that now 73 sonnets into the canon, 73 sonnets into the relationship, the young man is either saying things or doing things or behaving in such a way that makes me, the poet, say, you know exactly where I'm at. You see me exactly for what I am, and your love is all the stronger for it. And that means that our fickle young man, good-looking, rich, powerful, unfaithful, asserting his independence when he needs to, can also, now at any rate, maybe previously he couldn't, but now he can behave and conduct himself in a way that projects emotional maturity, that manages to reassure, that manages to confirm, that manages to tell his older lover, the writer, the poet, me, Shakespeare, I am with you. I know what I'm loving, I know who you are, I know you are older than me, but I love you still, I love you anyway, even though you won't be around forever, neither will I. Let that not be an issue. I'm putting words now into the mouth of this young man, which is strictly conjecture. That is not what's in the words of the sonnets, but what the words of the sonnets tell us with a great degree of certainty, with a great degree, at any rate, of probability, with a great degree of probability, most certainly, is that something to that end, something along those lines has come or is coming from the young man. And that is a revelation. And the revelation takes on, as any good revelation does, of course, multiple layers of significance. It's significant directly in terms of the relationship between William Shakespeare and him, the young man, but it is also, of course, incredibly significant in terms of who the young man is and how he is, and also how he's developing, how he's growing up, whom he is turning into. And this points strongly, as many other things have pointed at strongly, that either poets start the relationship with the young man when the young man is very young, has a lot of developing still to do, and it also confirms, also something we have already hinted at or recognized to quite some extent, that by now quite a bit of time has already passed. We don't know how much yet, but we know that some time has passed, 73 sonnets. Even if 3 of these are written each week, we are talking about weeks, 20, 30 weeks. We might be talking about 40, 50 weeks. We might be talking about a year. We might be talking about more than a year by now. We have a trajectory. And we have a trajectory during which the relationship goes through different stages, different phases, and that is, of course, what makes a story. That is why I keep saying that these sonnets chart a path, chart a journey, because these two people do not remain the same, but especially, and this is what comes through here, in what the poet, what I, Shakespeare, am saying about the young man. Through these words comes through a realization that the young man is developing into a different person, into a more grown-up person, maybe. We don't want to read too much into it. We can only know what's in the words. We can, after all, only say what's actually in the words. But that is in the words. You see me as who I am, and yet you love me still. And I think that's all I really want to say this week. Now, we are now at the midpoint. We have now read and posted on Podbean and on YouTube 77 sonnets, and that's the midpoint. There are 154, 77 is half of 154. We are in the middle. And so next week, I'm going to take this opportunity to next week do a little bit of taking stock, bit of looking at where we've got to so far and where, therefore, maybe the trajectory is going to lead us. So next episode, episode 12, will not actually be about a specific sonnet. It will be about the first half of the arc. I'm going to do this on the one hand because we have reached midpoint and this seems to be an opportune moment to do so, and secondly, for a purely personal reason, I'm here in New York with a project that next week is going to go into live performance. Next week we have production week, and so next week I'll be extremely busy doing many other things as well as this, and so I will not be posting any sonnets during next week. I will resume in a week's time, and next episode 12 is going to be taking stock. Will be a midpoint, a little look back and a bit of a look forward. So I hope, of course, that you will stay with me. Remember, love is the power, and see you next week.